The moment the little girl looked up at the waitress with her innocent eyes and uttered the words, "Can you be my mommy?" It was as if time itself stood still inside the small diner. For the waitress, who had just been going about her shift, balancing trays of coffee and plates of food, the unexpected request hit her harder than anything she could have imagined. She froze for a second, her heart pounding, because those words weren't just a childish whim. They carried a depth of longing that could only come from a child who truly felt something missing in her life. The girl, wrapped in her small pink coat, clung tightly to the waitress's arm as if she had already found the comfort she had been searching for. There was no hesitation in her embrace, no shyness in her voice. To her, this woman who had shown her a gentle smile and a kind word was already someone who represented love and warmth, someone who filled an empty space in her little heart. For the waitress, the situation was confusing and overwhelming. She was used to being kind to customers, especially children, since her nature was gentle and empathetic. But this was something entirely different. She felt the weight of the little girl's words pressing against her soul. It wasn't just a request, it was a plea. And in that moment, she couldn't help but wonder about the child's life, about what she must have gone through to ask such a profound question to a stranger. A child doesn't ask for a mother unless she feels a strong void, unless she desperately yearns for the affection and security that only a mother's embrace could bring. The little girl's innocent request also revealed something even deeper: how easily children can see goodness in others. To her, the waitress wasn't just someone serving food or wearing an apron. She was someone who radiated kindness, someone who looked at her not as a burden or distraction, but with gentle care. In that moment, the girl's instinct spoke louder than any adult reasoning. She reached out for what her heart told her was safe, pure, and full of love. And that is why she didn't hesitate when she asked for something so life-changing. Because in her world, what mattered most wasn't wealth, status, or appearances, but the feeling of being wanted, loved, and protected. The atmosphere in the diner shifted subtly. Other customers glanced over, sensing that something unusual and touching was happening. The waitress, holding the child close, felt a lump in her throat, torn between her role as a stranger and the undeniable bond that had just been created in a heartbeat. That single moment, born out of a child's longing and a woman's quiet compassion, was powerful enough to alter the paths of everyone present. It was more than just a tender exchange. It was the beginning of something that none of them could have anticipated, a spark that carried the promise of healing, belonging, and perhaps even love. The father stood frozen a few steps away, his tall frame and expensive suit suddenly seeming out of place in the warmth of the small diner. For years, he had been known as the man who never flinched, never hesitated, the CEO who could make decisions worth millions with a calm nod of his head. Yet now, faced with the innocent words of his own daughter, he found himself completely powerless. He watched as his little girl clung to the waitress with a joy and tenderness that she rarely displayed with him, and the realization struck him like a thunderbolt. His daughter wasn't asking for just any mommy, she was crying out for something he had failed to give her, a mother's love. The weight of that truth was unbearable. He had built an empire, signed contracts that shaped industries, and stood at the helm of boardrooms filled with powerful men and women. People admired him for his strength, his confidence, and his unwavering control. But none of that mattered in this diner, not when his daughter's small voice revealed the one place where all his success meant nothing: her heart. He had always tried his best to provide for her, to give her the finest clothes, the best schools, the most comfortable home. But as he stood there watching her wrap her tiny arms around the waitress, he realized that material comforts could never fill the emptiness left by the absence of a mother's embrace. Inside, he felt a mix of emotions that he struggled to control. There was guilt, because he wondered if his endless work had robbed his daughter of the affection she needed. There was pain, because hearing her longing spoken aloud was like a wound being uncovered. But there was also fear of what this moment revealed about him. For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer, he didn't have a solution. He was a man used to solving problems with logic, strategy, and power, yet this wasn't a problem of business. This was about love, and love was something he had been keeping locked away since the day he became a single father. The sight of his daughter's smile as she clung to the waitress pierced his defenses further. It was a smile he hadn't seen in so long, pure and carefree, as if in that moment she finally felt safe. His chest tightened as he realized how little it took for her to feel that way. Not luxury, not wealth, but the simple kindness of a stranger who looked at her with gentle eyes. He stood still, almost invisible in that corner of the diner, watching the two worlds collide, his daughter's innocent wish and his own carefully guarded heart. And though his lips never moved, his silence spoke volumes. It revealed a vulnerability he didn't want anyone to see, a part of him that longed, just like his daughter, for a connection deeper than anything money could ever buy. In that silence, he felt exposed. For the first time, he wasn't the untouchable CEO. He was just a father, broken by the reminder that no matter how powerful or successful he was, he couldn't replace the one thing his daughter needed most. That moment became a mirror, showing him not who he was to the world, but who he truly was in the eyes of his child, a man trying, yet failing, to give her the love she so desperately craved. The encounter inside the modest diner carried a quiet magic, the kind that cannot be planned or staged. On one side sat the waitress, a young woman who had been fighting her own daily battles, pouring endless cups of coffee and working long shifts just to make ends meet. On the other stood the powerful CEO, a man who seemed to have everything yet was burdened by a loneliness that no amount of wealth could erase. Between them was the little girl, the innocent bridge connecting two vastly different worlds. It was a simple request, spoken with childlike purity, that pulled them into the same orbit and began to blur the sharp lines that separated their lives. The waitress, still holding the little girl close, felt a wave of protectiveness she could not explain. She hadn't asked to be part of this family story, yet here she was, suddenly swept into a moment that carried enormous weight. Her life had been defined by hard work and quiet resilience, often overlooked by people rushing in and out of the diner. But now, this child's embrace made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. It was as if fate had chosen her to step into a role she never imagined for herself, a role she felt both unprepared for and yet strangely destined to fill. For the CEO, watching from a few steps away, the contrast could not have been more striking. His days were filled with polished boardrooms, towering skyscrapers, and decisions that shaped the lives of thousands. Yet in this humble setting, he realized how small and fragile his world really was when compared to the simple needs of his daughter. The waitress, with no riches to her name, had managed in mere seconds to give the little girl something he had failed to provide despite all his resources: genuine warmth and maternal affection. The irony stung, but it also awakened something in him, a spark of humility and hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this meeting was not an accident but a turning point. The little girl, blissfully unaware of the weight of the moment, giggled softly as she nestled into the waitress's arms. Her joy was unfiltered, her trust unconditional. To her, this was not a chance encounter but the answer to a silent prayer she had carried in her tiny heart. The way she clung to the waitress told a story that words could not capture. She had found someone who felt like home. And in that moment, both the waitress and the CEO realized that the child's instincts were leading them somewhere larger than themselves, somewhere that could change all their lives. This diner, with its worn leather seats and simple charm, became the stage for something profound. It was no longer just a place where food was served. It became the backdrop for destiny weaving its threads. The encounter hinted at healing for the little girl, purpose for the waitress, and redemption for the father. Though they had only just met, the bond forming between them suggested that their paths were meant to intertwine. It was the kind of moment that begins quietly but grows into a story of love, resilience, and the unexpected ways life brings the right people together when they need each other most.